We also know that she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves.
A powerful new message from Savannah Guthrie nearly a month after her mom was taken from her home in the middle of the night.
We are offering a family reward of up to $1 million for any information that leads us to her recovery.
This new reward comes as there are new concerns about the DNA found on the scene, whether it could lead us to answering the question of what happened to Nancy Guthrie. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It is now the fourth week that law enforcement have been searching for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. Now, before we get to the new information from the Guthrie family, I want to keep you posted on what just came in regarding the DNA that is being tested that was reportedly found inside Nancy Guthrie's home. CBS News is reporting that there are concerns about the DNA sample that was found in Nancy's home and that it may not be enough to get a usable profile to be able to put into CODIS, the FBI's national database, or be used to be tested on a private DNA database for investigative genetic genealogy. Now, CBS News says they have a source that put it to them in the words, quote, low level when talking about this DNA sample. Now, the Pima County Sheriff uses a private lab in Florida to test the DNA. Now, that lab has been somewhat controversial in the Guthrie case. There was a story by Reuters from an FBI official who said that there was frustration that the sheriff was not sending DNA directly to the FBI's lab in Quantico, Virginia, but instead was using the private lab in Florida that the Pima County Sheriff's Department already uses. Now, we've had on former members of the Pima County Sheriff's Department who tell us that they have used this lab in Florida before on their cases, and it is very good, but they admit that there are questions about whether or not that lab should have been used. Now, the fact that the DNA may not be strong enough to be used in this case, to be put into CODIS or to be used for investigative genetic genealogy, that may not be an indictment on this lab, just the reality of what was actually taken from Nancy Guthrie's home. Now, Sheriff Chris Nanos with the Pima County Sheriff's Department told CBS that the lab has not reached a conclusion on whether the DNA is usable. The Pima County Sheriff also told NBC that the DNA that was found is considered mixed DNA, meaning that sample had more than one person's DNA. Now, Nanos also told NBC in just the last couple of days that the lab did have some, quote, challenges when it came to processing the DNA. He didn't elaborate too much, but he did say, quote, we listened to our lab and our lab tells us that there's challenges with it and we understand those challenges, but our lab also knows that the technology is moving so fast and in such a frenzy that they think some of this stuff will resolve itself in just a matter of weeks, months, or maybe a year to allow them to do better with, say, a mixture of that kind of thing, end quote. Now, obviously, when you hear a year, you think of just how long the time frame could be in figuring out what happened to Nancy Guthrie. The truth is, though, with missing persons cases, many times they do take years to figure out what happened. That is not what anybody wants in the case of Nancy Guthrie. It's not what anybody would want in any missing persons investigation. Now, the sheriff said that the specific sample has yet to be submitted into investigative genetic genealogy testing or into CODIS. Now, CODIS is the FBI's national database, and there are profiles in there from people who were convicted of crimes or arrested. And just because a sample doesn't match in CODIS, it doesn't mean that it can't be useful or be matched down the line. It roughly has only 6% of the population in it. The FBI has been offering a reward of $100,000. And then on top of that, there was a private reward amount that was put in through Crime Stoppers from a personal injury attorney in Wisconsin of roughly $100,000. So as of today, it was $200,000 for information to find Nancy Guthrie. But then today's show host Savannah and her family say that they are now putting $1 million up in hopes it will help someone come forward with information about what happened to their mom.
Hi there. I'm coming on to say it is day 24 since our mom was taken in the dark of night from her bed. And every hour and minute and second And every long night has been agony since then of worrying about her and fearing for her and aching for her. And most of all, just missing her, just missing her. We know that millions of you have been praying. So many people have been praying of every faith and no faith at all, praying for her return. And we feel those prayers. Please keep praying without ceasing. We still believe.
Savannah posted this new video on Instagram Tuesday morning, and not only did she announce that $1 million number, but for the first time, she made a heartbreaking admission.
We still believe in a miracle. We still believe that she can come home. Hope against hope. As my sister says, we are blowing on the embers of hope. We also know that she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves and is dancing in heaven with her mom and her dad and with her beloved brother Pierce and with our daddy. And if this is what is to be, then we will accept it.
Now, in Savannah's previous messages, she had not publicly stated the possibility that her mom may no longer be alive. When she first went missing, the Pima County Sheriff said that Nancy Guthrie was very sharp mentally, but physically she had challenges. She couldn't walk 50 yards on her own, the sheriff said. She also needed medication daily, and without it, she could die. Now, even though Savannah appears to be coming to grips with the chance that her mom has passed away, she did make this announcement about the reward money.
But we need to know where she is. We need her to come home. For that reason, we are offering a family reward of up to $1 million for any information that leads us to her recovery. All of the information about this reward and the details is in the caption below. You can call the 1-800 tip line. You can be anonymous if you want. Someone out there knows something that can bring her home. Somebody knows. We are begging you to please come forward now.
Now, Savannah said that she hopes that someone calls that FBI tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI, or just finds a way to reach out to her personally. It is unclear if new information came in today that prompted the family to make this big offer of reward money. Fox News is reporting the family wanted to put a large amount of reward money out early on in the investigation, but law enforcement told them to hold off because there was a concern that it would generate a lot of false leads. Now, in the 24 days since this story started and this search has gone on, the FBI and the local sheriff's office have said that they have received tens of thousands of tips. And as much as it is a strength, an important tool to have the public on your side, the local 911 manager in Pima County said their lines have been overwhelmed with so many people calling in, not necessarily with information that can help the case, but opinions, which can be frustrating. Now, it's still unclear how close the hundreds of members of law enforcement, including FBI agents, are to finding the person or people who took Nancy Guthrie. Overnight, several media outlets reported that these two images of a suspect or suspects on the front steps of Nancy Guthrie's house were actually taken on separate nights. You notice when you look at these pictures, you can see that in one, the person is wearing a backpack, and in the other, they're not. Now, previously, we were told to believe that these images were from around the time that Nancy Guthrie was taken. The reports suggest that the kidnappers had been to Nancy's house before she was taken. Now, whether or not that's true, this is the response from the Pima County Sheriff. They put out a statement as this story was starting to make the rounds. The sheriff says that a report suggesting the images were from different nights is, quote, purely speculative. That's because the images don't have timestamps. Now, the sheriff has said that investigators are not ruling out the possibility that more than one person is involved in the abduction of Nancy Guthrie. The FBI has been far quieter in releasing information in this case compared to the local authorities, but that is typically what we see in investigations like this. Now, as the days have turned into weeks, the public has grown restless with this case not being cracked yet. Over the weekend, public search groups showed up at Nancy Guthrie's house. Here's how the sheriff responded with a statement that reads, quote, "Volunteer search groups have inquired about being in the area. Per the sheriff, they were asked to please give investigators the space they need to do their work. We appreciate their concern and we all want to find Nancy, but this work is best left to professionals. PCSD has volunteer opportunities if they wish to get involved with the department. Private property laws apply. It is up to each individual property owner to grant permission for anyone to be on their property," end quote. Now, as we close in on a month of searching for Nancy Guthrie with no arrest, no rescue, no recovery, there are concerns that law enforcement may start to pull resources back, which does happen in missing persons cases that go cold. But cold is not how the sheriff or anyone has characterized the search for Nancy Guthrie. And over the weekend, the sheriff also pushed back on the suggestion that resources may be pulled back. He said, quote, "There have been no changes to resources in this investigation. There may be fluctuations day to day based on investigative leads. Several hundred law enforcement personnel remain dedicated to this case. This will remain an active investigation until Nancy Guthrie is found or all leads are exhausted," end quote. The search for Nancy Guthrie has become one of the most high-profile missing persons cases that we've seen in some time. Many, watching the amount of resources going into the case, have brought up the hundreds of thousands of cases that go unsolved of people who are missing in the United States. According to a government website, each year, the number of people who go missing is between 500,000 and 600,000 people. And along with that $1 million reward that the Guthrie family have put up in the search for their mom, Savannah also said this.
We also know that we are not alone in our loss. We know there are millions of families that have suffered with this kind of uncertainty. And for that reason today, we also are donating $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for their work in helping families who are coping with loss and actively looking for those who are lost. We are hoping that the attention that has been given to our mom and our family will extend to all the families like ours who are in need and need prayers and need support. So please, if you hear this message, if you've been waiting and you haven't been sure, let this be your sign to please come forward, tell what you know, and help us bring our beloved mom home so that we can either celebrate a glorious, miraculous homecoming or celebrate the beautiful, brave, and courageous and noble life that she has lived. Please be the light in the dark.
If you have any information on where Nancy Guthrie is, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. The Pima County Sheriff's Department can be reached at 520-351-4900. And you can also contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. Joining us now to talk about this case is missing persons private investigator Steve Fisher. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. You know, this $1 million number from the Guthrie family, and you just feel the emotion in Savannah's voice once again, as we're now in week 4 of the search for Nancy Guthrie. And then there's the story that comes out that this is what the family wanted to do initially, but police were concerned, law enforcement, that you put that number out there and a ton of fake tips are going to come in and it might jeopardize the investigation. I mean, you investigate a lot of these missing persons cases where I'm sure family members are like, I would put money up to bring my loved one home. Like, when is the right time to actually do a big reward like the Guthrie family's doing?
It's tough because I'll tell you what, I've even written a blog post on my website a long time ago about how I personally don't really agree with rewards because they really muddy the waters. You'd be shocked how many scammers come out of the woodwork. And this is for $5,000 rewards, $10,000 rewards. The only time I really agree with it is if it's put up through like Crime Stoppers or something like that can kind of control the things. But what happens is you get so many scammers, and every lead's got to be run down, and they don't tend to work. I remember the Harmony Montgomery case. I think I got up to $300,000, and they were in a motel room with these homeless people, and they still didn't give them up for 300 grand. So now $1 million is a big number, and I can see why the family wanted to do it. I can also see why law enforcement didn't want them to do it, because they already had $30,000 or 30 or 40,000 leads come in, mostly because of Savannah, right? Because she's brought so much attention to this. It's almost like $1 million reward. Everybody wants to be involved, but I get why she's done it, and I know she was getting a lot of heat for like, why haven't somebody put up like a $2,500 reward, and they're like, the family's not even matching that. Well, here's the reason why. They wanted to, but they're listening to law enforcement, and I think now, getting that we're close to a month in, I think you're going to see them make some moves on their own. The family's like, listen, I think you'll see them start doing things like this, with or without law enforcement's blessing.
Right, because as much as the sheriff in this case, Chris Nanos, he's taken a lot of criticism, and there's a lot of expert law enforcement people, and I'm not one of them, in terms of having experience running investigations, who have been critical of things that he's done. But at the same time, when you hear about the tips that have come in and just how many there are, like, you kind of understand the strategy of like, hold off on putting this big number out there, but it happened anyway. I know the 911 dispatcher, like the head of the dispatchers in Pima County, was saying like the amount of people just calling in with opinions on how they should run the investigation. It's like clogging up the line. So like, I get it. But here we are, like 24 days in. Part of this video, Savannah Guthrie, like really for the first time, is kind of admitting, what may be true, which is that her mom is likely no longer alive. Potentially no longer alive, I'll say, but just obviously at 84 years old, and you worry about the care that she's in, as we all hope that a good thing, can still come of this, and that she can be brought home safely. And we don't know until we know. At the same time, like, we're at day 24, and you hear about the DNA reports coming in, that it doesn't seem like that might have a lot of teeth to it. I mean, where do investigators go next at this point? Because I know that they say they still have leads, but you just have to wonder, when is something going to break in this case?
It just seems like it's all bad news right now. Everything seems to be going against investigators. But I've been saying, each time I've been on your show, I've been saying, I hope they release more surveillance. And I know they've kind of alluded to, we didn't have it from other cameras, and maybe this is all they have. But now we found out that they actually have a piece of surveillance that could be weeks earlier. This other image. So it seems like they were able to peel back more of that, that, or were able to recover more of that footage. And then we think, and if they have more footage, I just think that's the key, right? Now, that coupled with, one thing the $1 million reward is going to do is going to bring out a ton of people, and psychics and all that. But it's also going to, if you're that kidnapper and you've got a close circle of people that know what's going on, maybe a family member or something like that, you're going to get really paranoid that your own people are turning on you. And that could create some really strange infighting, and people start making weird moves. And, so it could actually, that number being so big could create kind of a weird dynamic where they start cannibalizing each other. And, and then it just kind of comes to the surface from that. But, where to go next, they just got to keep, listen, I mean, I think there should be more searches out there. I don't understand why the sheriff was opposed to these volunteer-based searches. He was saying they had to get a search permit. There's no such thing as a search and rescue permit, by the way. I mean, if you're on public land, you can search, as long as you don't trespass and stuff. People shouldn't be out there unless, they can do it health-wise and stuff like that. They don't want to create more problems for first responders. But there needs to be eyeballs out there, because if we're 24 days in. If they don't have her, then they obviously did dumped her somewhere, and that's probably going to be in an open space somewhere or water, and they need eyeballs out there. And I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of Pima County search and rescue and them bringing in other counties on a mutual aid basis to help with assist, and haven't seen more air operations going on. Maybe they do know something, and they're strangely slow to uncover it. But it seems like there should be more of a search effort going on.
Yeah, it's very interesting because they and to an extent, I mean, with the amount of attention that this case is getting, and I know that there's this like rivalry between like mainstream media and like streamers on the street there, and I'm sure for investigators, they're still trying to control some of these scenes, even though we've seen like pool cleaners show up. I think a landscaping crew was there. So you have to wonder like how much of a crime scene is it at this point? What evidence hasn't been taken away? Like they also were very much like, we're not interested in these volunteer groups that are coming in. One thing on the ransom, because I noticed in Savannah's post, she said you could call that 1-800-CALL-FBI number or just find a way to get in touch with me. How have you seen in some, because I'm sure like if you're someone who actually has information on this and you look at that $1 million figure and you think to yourself, like calling the FBI might not be the best option if you're trying to not get arrested and be held to the highest letter of the law. And, does DMing Savannah Guthrie or finding a way to get in touch with her, like, do you see those kind of more personal approaches when it comes to, it's not even Crime Stoppers, it's just get in touch with Savannah, that could be something that could help in this case?
Yeah, 100%. And this is a piece where, and I'm not saying this for my own benefit. I'm not putting myself up for the job, but this is where Savannah would probably be smart to bring in some private investigators, because there's people that just are not willing to talk with law enforcement or FBI. They're all law enforcement, obviously, but because they're in that they know what's going on because they're kind of in that criminal element. But they will talk to private investigators. And I think it'd be, if for no other reason, if she had some private investigators that can take those calls, I think, those people will talk to them because they know they're not law enforcement, no power of arrest. Instead of her maybe dealing directly. But if she wants to do it the way, that's fine. I think if somebody does come forward, I think it's going to be through a channel that's not law enforcement. It's going to come direct to her, or somebody is going to pass the information along on behalf of that person to law enforcement as an intermediary. And I think there's a chance somebody knows. I mean, besides the guy that we see in the video, there's other people that know. I mean, there's got to be 2, 3, 4 other people that do have it. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. And you wonder, again, like you really start turning the heat up, because even like the people who sent in, whether or not those ransom notes were ever true, like, I know they wanted 6 million, that first initial, ransom note, but like we're talking about $1 million. It's not like the guy who's just looking for Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin for 60.
Well, what about him? Wanted 1 Bitcoin. Why doesn't he come get the million?
And that's why with that one, it felt like a little bit with that one, it was like, this one doesn't seem, I mean,
he kind of got called out here. Like now he's looking, not knocking TMZ, but they hyped that pretty hard. Now that, that's not, I think we're, listen, the money talks right now, and that's a huge amount of money. So it's kind of like now the playing field's set. And I think if somebody's going to come forward, though, I think it's going to be in the next 24 hours. Otherwise, I don't think they will, and who knows if they're, I don't think that there's a Mexico element to this as far as like cartel goes. It very well could be somebody that lives in Mexico that's not involved in a cartel is doing a side thing. But with what's happening in Mexico right now too, it's just a really, horrible timing. If by chance she happens to be over the border, because so many resources are diverted to deal with, what's going on and trying to get people out of the country.
Right. And that was the part, I think, from the beginning that's been interesting, where it's so easy to just cross there. But then at the same time, there are 1 million cameras. You can get across really easy, but they're going to have a ton of pictures of you, like as you go across. The timestamp story that came out last night, I thought was really interesting, because every media outlet seemed to be reporting the same thing, like within the span of an hour. It was like Fox News, ABC News, News Nation, and it was these pictures. One is a person in the backpack, which we've all seen, and then there's the other picture where it doesn't appear that they're wearing a backpack, that these were shot on separate days. And it's like this kind of the first big, like, oh my gosh, moment we've had in this case for the last few days. But then the sheriff comes out and he kind of pushes back and he says there's no timestamps to these pictures and everything's purely speculative because we don't know. It was like this idea of like, well, we don't really know when the pictures were taken. But then it's like, it's one of those things. It's like the information was coming from somewhere for every major media outlet to get that. But then for the sheriff to push back, I just thought it makes you wonder exactly what we know about these pictures and how many other pictures there may be.
And listen, the sheriff's department might not know how many other pictures there are, because I think that FBI and the sheriff's department are working this case. I don't think they're working it together that closely anymore. The FBI could have a lot more information that the sheriff doesn't even know about. And that's not untypical. One thing that I always hear in these cases is from local law enforcement is sometimes they don't want to bring the FBI in because they say, the FBI wants all of our information, but they don't share any of their information with us. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about, Pima. I'm talking about every case that I've worked on. It's pretty much been the case. But I think because of some of these things that have happened along the way here, I think that there are two parallel investigations going on. Yes, they're going to appear as a united front, but I think that I don't think there's a lot of information sharing going on. And I think they're running, doing things separately. And I think that leak, if you want to call it that, or that information, whatever it is, probably came from the FBI.
Yeah. And we've seen, at least, they're the only ones who know like actually how this investigation's going. But it's like even that Reuters story from a couple of weeks ago about the DNA lab. And it just seemed like there was a little bit of a rivalry, at least brewing between, those sides, as this has been going on. The sheriff has used the term, it could be days, could be months, could be years. And in some of these, and for you, these cases, as much as we all were thinking, like in the first couple of days, like I couldn't look away from my phone because it's like, this is going to be the moment that, this case cracks, but now it's just kind of blended into day after day. And now day 24, like in these cases, how often is this we're talking months, if not years, in terms of finding Nancy Guthrie or at least figuring out what happened?
Well, so, that can be the case in any case. But the thing is that because the sheriff is frustrated and he's getting beat up in the media and stuff, it's not really a reason to go out and make statements like that. That's just gutting the family. The family knows that's probably the reality of the situation. It could be tomorrow. It could be a year. With a missing person, it's just impossible to tell. But the sheriff it almost sounds like defeat. And I don't think that that's healthy, for the situation right now. And I think what he's got to do is, I realize he's taking a lot of shots, and I think some of them aren't really warranted. I think it's a really, listen, there's no higher profile case in, recent history. Right. And you get thrown into it, and he's got a young force. I get that, everybody's got, but listen, you can say stuff about the FBI too, right? It's not the time to play that out, so he needs to try and, I feel like he shut down these press conferences because he's like, well, if you guys are just going to pick on me, I'm not going to have the press conferences. Well, you still got to have them anyway, because the family needs that. And I know the family knows, is doing more behind the scenes, but, I think it's important for the family that the community is engaged. Like when they have reps going online saying, oh, we want all these streamers out of here and stuff. I know Savannah can bring a massive media presence, but they're already starting. Mainstream media is already starting to leave because there's other stories and stuff. I guarantee they want those eyeballs still on the case, And so I don't know if that was her wish to run those people out of there. Or try to run those people out of there. So, right. I don't know. I think I think that they should start doing press conferences, even if they're short, just very short. There wasn't much today. There's this, because what happens is they say there's not a planned one, and then all of a sudden, about 4 or 5 o'clock, a bunch of important information comes out.
Right.
We got the DNA doesn't now is not viable. We got all these other things. We got the stuff about the surveillance. They're not press conferences, but major news is dropping every day. So
Well, I think too, like just an example of like, I mean, Savannah puts out this message today, and it did feel like there's a little bit more life in the story today and the coverage that it's getting compared to the last couple of days. And that was just with a 4-minute Instagram video and clearly a large amount of money that she's putting out there. With this too, I mean, again, this is still incredibly high profile. This case is the case right now that everybody's talking about across the country. And you see that in the attention that it's getting. But at the same time, like these missing persons cases, and I'm sure you've seen it, where like at some point, like for Pima County and their budget, and even the FBI, and if they have dozens of agents down there, like what is the timeline on the resources? And I know there was a report that they were pulling back, and then the sheriff pushed back on that once again, and still the attention's hot, but like what is the timeline typically in cases like this for law enforcement to continue to have their foot on the gas day in and day out?
I mean, in my experience, we've kind of passed that point. They are pulling back, whether they want to say it or not. I mean, the feds are pulling resources out. They'll draw it down as slowly as possible, but other things are happening. Or FBI is a federal bureau, so things are happening, and Pima County will dedicate what they can, but and there's probably a lot of leads still left to run down. But when they look at them, they probably are like, we know that these really aren't solid leads. They got to run them down. But so they're gonna pull back resources, and I think the family, since they're one of the 1% of families this happens to that has the ability to do so, I think they're gonna have to bring in private resources. And I'm not saying it's private investigators. So I mean, I think they're gonna need to get private search, private, investigators, private canine teams, they're going to have to supplement that, because we don't have besides the house, we don't even have a direction of travel, from
Right.
the house that she went. It's going to be a massive effort. And, so, maybe that's going on behind the scenes. I think that's where it goes. But yeah, they're going to draw down. Listen, they're going to draw down assets, and they already are. And it'll go. Then they'll start talking about, well, we're working on an investigative basis. In other words, when leads come up, when new stuff comes up, when returns on DNA or search warrants or whatever. I'm kind of surprised there hasn't been any more search warrants served that we know about.
Yeah. No, and that was the thing. Like we had that span, and I mean, especially with the the house that was served with the federal warrant, and then they had the traffic stop by the Culvers, and then the sheriff's like, expect more of this activity to happen, and we haven't had someone detained since.
And I'm kind of surprised that we haven't heard from those people like we did Carlos. So it does make me wonder. It does make me wonder if maybe that's not such a closed lead yet, and maybe there's something to it. But I just hope it's just slow going every day. I just can't imagine with the Guthrie. I mean, I see it every day with my clients and stuff too, but it's I just recognize that look. I'll never know what that feels like because I've never had it happen to me, but I'm around it every day, and it's just the emptiness in people's faces when they have a missing loved one. And I want to commend them too for throwing 500. They know that they're taking all the oxygen out of the room as far as press goes for all the other missing cases, and I think it was a really classy move of them to donate $500,000 to NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, because they know what's happening. They know that all the attention's on them, and that's going to help other kids be found. And I think that was a very classy move.
Yeah, it was. And we have seen, in this case, because there's so, it's the national story, Nancy Guthrie, but also the amount of people who are saying like, hey, like there are loved ones who go missing under very, very, sad circumstances as well, that will never get a fraction of the attention that this case is. Not that one is worth more than the other. And so that 500,000, hopefully it, very classy move by the Guthrie family now on day 24 of this search. And you just hope, we'll get that alert at some point that that there's some good news coming their way, coming everyone's way. Missing persons private investigator Steve Fisher, always great to have you on Law&Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Before we go, once again, the numbers you can call with information on where Nancy Guthrie may be. You can contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. In Pima County, it's 520-351-4900. And you can also contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. And as a reminder, per 911 operators in Pima County, Arizona, if you are going to call in with information, ask yourself a couple of questions before you pick up the phone. And as 911 operators in Pima County, Arizona have reiterated, they want to make sure people are calling in with actual potential information that can help find Nancy Guthrie, not just an opinion on how this case is going. That will do it for this episode of On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and now you can find episodes of On the Case streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.